eyes are on the state of South Carolina, where Nikki Haley is facing off against Donald Trump, one of the state's former elected governor, and the other a leading frontrunner among all Republicans. Caroline Malone reports what's at stake.
Well, anticipation is building here in South Carolina ahead of Saturday's Republican Party primary election. The two main contenders, Donald Trump and Nikki Haley, have been campaigning in events across the state. Here in Charleston, we've had Donald Trump Jr. speaking to crowds. He, of course, is the son of the former president. He's been speaking about how Trump is the right man to lead the country again, how he is a strong leader that can really support the United States, particularly on a global level, how he'll fix the border issues, crack down on immigration, and also build on a strong economy. And those do seem to be the issues that voters are engaged with. Of those people that I've spoken to, they're certainly concerned about immigration and about jobs and the economy. But Nikki Haley's also been speaking to crowds about much the same thing. She's been saying her track record when she was South Carolina governor shows that she can help to build the economy, that she can help to build jobs as well. She's also spoken in campaign videos as well about the chaos surrounding Donald Trump and how that's not going to be good for the country, and about how the chaos of the current President Biden will not be replaced, cannot be replaced by the chaos of Donald Trump. She says she's the right person because she doesn't bring this level of chaos with her and she wouldn't, to the White House. So it's all for fighting for, and the challenge is big for Nikki Haley against Donald Trump. Current polls show that she's about 30 points behind the former president. However, if she was to make it through a matchup with current President Biden, she actually might win, according to some polls. So everything to play for here in South Carolina. Caroline Malone for CGTN in Charleston, South Carolina.
Well, elections are increasingly expensive, and 2024 is no different. It looks as though ad spending is going to reach an all-time high. Let's crunch some of the numbers. Donald Trump's campaign raised less the money than President Biden's campaign in January, while President Biden raised more than $15 million. Trump's camp just under $9 million. The Trump campaign's cash holdings falling to just over $30 million at the end of January, while Biden disclosed to the Federal Election Commission that his campaign has about $56 million in its war chest. A record $16 to $17 billion could be spent just on advertising for the 2024 election. That is 30% more than the 2019-2020 election cycle. Okay, now with the South Carolina primary coming this weekend, let's take a closer look at what's happening in the U.S. presidential race. Joining us to discuss all of this is Seth Masket, a professor and the director of the Center on American Politics at the University of Denver. Seth, welcome. Thanks very much for coming in and chatting. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Let's talk about Nikki Haley. Governor, been removed from that position for some time, was appointed UN ambassador by Donald Trump, and now the Trump faithful have portrayed her to be somewhat ungrateful at this point in the race. So how did we get here, and do you think those poll numbers are accurate? Do you think Trump is going to thrash her by 30 percentage points?
Well, we've only had a few contests so far this cycle, but so far the polling has been pretty good. It was very accurate in Iowa. It understated Haley's support a little bit in New Hampshire. So she had some momentum coming into New Hampshire. It's hard to say how she'll do in South Carolina. Obviously, this is her home state, sure, and she was governor here, but she was also governor under a very different Republican Party than we have today, that has really taken form since the Trump presidency. And Trump is very popular in the modern version of that party and has a lot of the party's sort of major elected figures and major party leaders on his side now.
Okay, so Haley is vowing to stick around no matter how she does in the race. Okay, what are the odds of that? Because to continue getting money from sponsors, she's going to have to show something to build on.
Yes, and the people who are backing her campaign, particularly the people who are backing her financially, they tend to really believe in what she's doing. They are very, leery of another Trump presidency. And one of the important splits within the Republican Party right now is that Trump has this large sort of populist base with him. But a lot of the sort of more traditional, the kind of financial wing of the party that did a lot of the major party donations years ago is not necessarily with him. They would probably back him in a general election, but they're very leery of him in the primary, and they've largely supported Haley so far. So she's done well raising money. And at least so far, they're willing to back her, even if she's a long shot, just because they want there to be another voice. And they want there to be, someone who could pick up the pieces in case
Right.
his campaign suddenly falls apart.
Yeah, and let's talk about how that campaign could suddenly fall apart. I've heard it described as it's 81 versus 91. 81-year-old Biden, 91 indictments for Trump. Obvious challenges to this as this moves on. I mean, he's been fined, close to $500 million, and he has been successful at whipping his fervent base and saying, look, this is the deep state. How do you move beyond these non-truths and focus on the issue?
I mean, we really don't have any sort of precedent like this before. I mean, we've never had a presidential candidate facing, 91 criminal indictments. And that's, we don't even know if there will be a conviction before the Republican convention, no less before even the November election. But he's already had a lot of, civil judgments against him. Obviously,
Sure.
You mentioned the, roughly $350 million settlement recently, on top of another multi-million-dollar settlement. He's, facing very severe financial penalties, even for a billionaire. That's going to force him to, well, we don't know what it's going to force him to do yet. I think he's looking for ways to actually use campaign donations to pay off his penalties. It's not clear if that's legal or not. He's trying to impose on the Republican National Committee to pay some of his legal penalties. It's not clear if that would be permitted. But he's facing I think some very serious circumstances right now. It's not clear whether he'd be better off as a presidential candidate or president,
Right.
or rather, someone fighting this in the private sector.
And you're going to have to sell a lot of gold lame sneakers to generate that kind of money as well. Let's talk about where Biden stands on fundraising, because look, he is not a popular candidate. His approval rating is like at 37%. At this point, I think you'd want the incumbent at least 50%. It doesn't bode well for Democrats.
It does not, and he's really, one of the least popular sitting presidents to run for re-election. So we're kind of in uncharted territory there. The sort of strange thing, though, is that he was not particularly popular in 2022. He had only an approval rating of around 40 or 41. Generally, not where you want your party's president to be. And yet, Democrats actually had a pretty good midterm year, one that would be more consistent with a far more popular president. In some strange way, we're sort of in an era where presidents just aren't that popular. They have like low ceilings and high floors. So we'll see how much that actually ends up mattering. Obviously, Democrats would rather he's more popular than he is, and it's possible he will become so as the relatively low unemployment and strong economic growth become more second nature to Americans who are, I think, still living with some of the memories of not very distant inflation and some of the memories of COVID. But for right now, it's presenting a real problem for Democrats.
Indeed, but November's a long way off, Seth. A lot of things could happen. We certainly appreciate your time. Thanks very much, and have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.